"You call this food?" Luke's voice sliced through the kitchen like a knife. He sat at the head of the table, glaring down at the platter I had just set out. For a second, the whole room froze. His parents, Evan and Vivian, paused mid-gesture with their wine glasses. My mom, who was cradling baby Lily, turned toward me with wide eyes. Even the ticking wall clock seemed to hold its breath. I stood by the counter, my hands still trembling from exhaustion after another day of juggling diapers, dishes, and a crying newborn. His words hit me like a verdict. "My parents aren't strays," he hissed. "Don't feed them scraps." The contempt in his tone stung worse than any slap. All eyes shifted to me, waiting to see how I'd respond. I leaned closer, dropped my voice low enough that only he could hear, and whispered, "I didn't order this." Luke froze, his eyes widened, his jaw twitched. For once he had no quick comeback. Evan leaned back in his chair, eyebrows narrowing. Vivian's gaze sharpened her expression unreadable. None of them knew what lay behind that simple tray of store-bought appetizers, weeks of sleepless nights, cracked lips, leaky shirts, and breakdowns in the shower that I fought to hide. My name is Sabrina. I'm 28 years old, a UX designer currently on maternity leave, and I used to believe I had built myself a pretty solid life. I thought I had chosen the right man to marry the right foundation for my future. Before we dive into true revenge stories, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. Luke, the man now scowling at me like I had humiliated him, was once the guy who made me feel like I was the only person in a crowded room. He used to be funny, attentive, charming. He used to hold my hand when I was nervous, kiss me on the forehead when I was tired, promise me the kind of love that lasts forever. Back then, he was the man my parents adored and my in-laws welcomed with open arms. Back then, he made me believe in fairy tales. But now, all I saw was a hardened face, a sneer in his voice, and a stranger where my husband used to be. Here's the truth. Luke didn't want me to cook out of love. He wanted me to impress his family, to put on a performance, so his parents would see him as the kind of man who married a perfect wife, one who juggled the baby, the house, and the kitchen without missing a beat. He wanted me to make him look good. And me, I was running on 2 hours of broken sleep, surviving on caffeine and willpower, and still somehow being told it wasn't enough. What Luke never expected was that the very people he wanted me to impress were about to flip the script on him. He thought his parents would judge me for store-bought food. He thought they would silently agree with him when he sneered at my effort. What he didn't know was that his parents had lived through struggles of their own, had seen through his excuses before, and were far less blind to his behavior than he imagined. To those of you watching true revenge stories from all over the world, whether you're in Texas, South Africa, the Philippines, or the UK, maybe you've heard the same tired line, "To be accepted by your in-laws, you've got to cook clean and prove yourself." Let me tell you, family doesn't measure your worth by what's on the table. Real family doesn't ask you to perform for acceptance. Real family shows up when it matters and tells you to your face when their own child is wrong. And in that moment when I whispered that I hadn't ordered the food, I could feel the storm rolling in. The storm that would tear away Luke's mask of perfection, strip him down to the man he really was, and finally shift the balance of power in my favor. That night wasn't just about food. It was about exposure. It was about a man so wrapped up in his ego that he couldn't see his wife drowning in plain sight. It was about a family who would shock him by standing not at his side, but at mine. Luke thought this dinner would prove I was unworthy. Instead, it would reveal everything he was trying to hide. This story isn't only about betrayal. It's about what happens when the people you expect to judge you choose to protect you instead. It's about how one whispered sentence at a dinner table became the beginning of the end and the start of my freedom. If you had asked me 3 years ago whether I believed in happy endings, I would have smiled and said yes. Because back then, with Luke by my side, life really did look like the beginning of a storybook. We met at a weekend retreat in the mountains introduced by mutual friends. He wasn't the most handsome man in the room, but he was the one everyone gravitated toward. He cracked jokes that made people laugh until their sides hurt, yet somehow when he spoke to me, it felt like we were in our own little bubble. He made me feel seen. Not just noticed, but truly seen. On our third date, he told me, "I can already picture us having a house with a backyard, maybe even a golden retriever." He said it with such conviction that I laughed, but deep down, I believed him. And that belief pulled me closer and closer into his orbit. After a year of dating, he proposed during a picnic by the coast. The wind was cool, the waves crashed just a few yards away, and I swear the sunlight hit his face at the exact moment he pulled out the ring. It was cheesy, almost cinematic, but in that moment it was perfect. I didn't even hesitate. I said yes. My parents adored him from the start. "He's charming," my mom gushed after their first dinner together. My dad, usually skeptical of everyone, shook Luke's hand firmly and said, "You've got potential." And Luke's parents, Evan and Vivian, welcomed me as if I'd been part of their family all along. Vivian called me her second daughter, Evan, brought bottles of wine and told Dad jokes that made us all groan but secretly smile. When we got married, both families pitched in for the down payment on a little starter home in the suburbs. It wasn't big, 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a patch of lawn out back, but it was ours. I remember standing in the empty living room boxes stacked around me thinking, this is it. This is the beginning of everything we've been dreaming about. For a while, it really was good. Luke cooked dinner when I worked late. We split chores evenly. On Sundays, we'd binge Netflix on the couch, his arm draped lazily around me while I buried my face in his shoulder. It wasn't glamorous, but it was cozy, real, and ours. Then came the pregnancy. When I told him, his eyes lit up. "I'm going to be the best dad ever," he said, kissing my stomach, even though there wasn't a bump yet. He swore he'd work extra hours to make sure we never had to worry about money. He promised he'd take care of me. And in those first few weeks, he really did. He cooked, cleaned, rubbed my swollen feet when I was too sore to stand. I thought, this is what love is supposed to look like. But as my belly grew, so did the cracks in our picture-perfect story. Luke's hours at work got longer. At first I chalked it up to his promise of working extra for the baby, but the longer he stayed away, the more distant he became. He stopped asking how I was feeling, stopped checking if I'd eaten, stopped noticing the way I struggled just to make it through the day. Still, I tried to justify it. He's stressed, he's tired, he's providing for us. That's what I told myself even when I was hunched over the toilet vomiting until my throat burned, only to drag myself up to scrub the bathtub, because no one else would. When I was working, we had been equals. But once I left my job for maternity leave, it was like I disappeared. My exhaustion became invisible, my effort became expected, and my silence became a breeding ground for his disappointment. It's funny how quickly love can turn into something else, something darker, without you even noticing it first. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. At the beginning, Luke would have laughed if I brought home takeout for dinner. He would have said, "Perfect, less cleanup," and kissed me on the cheek. Now, he looked at store-bought food like it was a personal insult. He wasn't just asking me to keep house, he was demanding that I perform to prove to him and everyone else that we had it together. Looking back, I realized that the seeds of what happened at that dinner table, the sneer, the contempt, the need to make me look small, were planted long before the food even hit the table. Because our story didn't fall apart in a single night. It cracked slowly, piece by piece, until I found myself standing in a kitchen with shaking hands and a husband who looked at me not like a partner, but like a failure. And maybe that's the cruelest part of all the fairy tale beginning, made the betrayal hurt even more. Pregnancy changes everything. People warn you about morning sickness, swollen ankles, weird cravings, but no one tells you about the loneliness. No one tells you how a house filled with baby books and ultrasound photos can still feel empty when the person you love most is drifting further and further away. At first, Luke's overtime didn't bother me. "I'm doing this for us," he'd say, kissing me on the forehead before heading out the door with his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that every late night, every missed dinner, every "sorry I'm swamped" text was a sacrifice he was making for our future family. But as my belly grew heavier, so did the silence between us. By the time I was 6 months along, I'd left my job on paid leave. I thought it would give me time to rest, to focus on preparing for the baby. What I didn't realize was that rest didn't exist when you were nauseous half the day, swollen the other half, and still trying to keep a house spotless because your husband thought staying home meant living in luxury. One evening, Luke came home earlier than usual. I was lying on the couch, my head pressed into a pillow, fighting waves of nausea. The kitchen was quiet. No dinner on the stove, no plates on the table, just silence. The first thing he did was frown. "You're just lying there." His tone wasn't curious. It was accusing. I pushed myself upright, my temples pounding. "I've been sick all afternoon. I just needed a minute." Luke dropped his bag, scanning the kitchen like it was evidence in a trial. "You've been home all day, Sabrina. There's nothing ready. I work 10 hours and I come home to this?" I blinked at him, stunned. "I'm growing a human being, Luke. I'm doing my best." "Oh, here we go," he muttered, yanking open the fridge for a beer. "You always play the pregnancy card when you don't want to do anything." The words cut deeper than he realized. My throat tightened. "Are you kidding me right now?" "No, I'm not." He didn't even look at me, just twisted the cap off his bottle. "You've checked out. You're not working. You barely do anything around here anymore." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "So what do you want from me, Luke? Do you want a wife or a full-time maid?" He shook his head like I was being dramatic. "I want you to stop acting like carrying a baby gives you a free pass." That was the moment something in me broke. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood, walked past him and said, "I'm going to stay with my parents. I need space. I need peace." His response was chilling in its indifference. "Fine. Do whatever you want." I packed a suitcase that night, tears streaming silently as I folded maternity jeans and oversized t-shirts into a duffel bag. At dawn, my dad pulled up in his pickup truck. He didn't say much, just squeezed my hand on the drive home. That silence, that steady hand, meant more than all of Luke's empty apologies ever had. My mom had the guest room ready with lavender lotion on the nightstand and clean sheets tucked tight. For the first time in months, I felt safe. 2 weeks passed, then 3. I sent Luke a single text updating him on the pregnancy. He never replied. The silence hurt, but it didn't surprise me. Deep down, I think I knew that once I walked out the door, he wouldn't fight for me. Maybe he never planned to, but someone else did. One afternoon, while I was folding tiny baby onesies in the living room, the doorbell rang. My mom called out, "Sabrina, you have visitors." I froze when I saw who was standing there, Evan and Vivian, my in-laws with worry etched on their faces. Vivian stepped inside first, her voice trembling. "We had no idea, sweetheart. Luke never told us you left." Evan lifted a paper bag of groceries. "We stopped by your place." He finally admitted it when we pressed him. I'm embarrassed we didn't notice sooner. I sank onto the couch, unsure what to say. Vivian sat beside me, her voice gentle. "I remember what pregnancy was like. You don't have to do this alone." They stayed for over an hour, sharing stories, even a few of Evan's corny jokes. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. Just a little. Inside, I was torn angry at Luke, but touched that his parents cared enough to show up. Maybe, just maybe, there was still compassion left in that family. But Luke, he didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't ask how the baby or I were doing. And that was when I realized something crucial. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most will abandon you. And sometimes, unexpectedly, others will step in to prove that love still exists. That night, as I lay in my childhood bed, I placed a hand over my swollen stomach and whispered to my daughter, "We're going to be okay. Even if it's just the two of us, we're going to be okay." The first morning back in my parents' house, I slept until noon, not because I was lazy, not because I didn't care, but because for the first time in months, I wasn't listening for the jingle of Luke's keys in the door, or the slam of his briefcase on the counter, or the sigh that always came before the criticism. Instead, I woke to the sound of my mom humming in the kitchen and the smell of cinnamon coffee drifting down the hall. When I shuffled into the living room, she already had a plate of scrambled eggs waiting. My dad was outside in the garden, whistling off-key while trimming hedges. It felt like stepping back into childhood, except I was carrying a child of my own. My mom fussed over me in the way only mothers can, pillows tucked just right behind my back, lavender lotion on the nightstand, soft blankets layered high. Every evening, she'd press a hand to my belly as if reassuring both me and the baby at the same time. "Safe now," she'd whisper. And I believed her. For 2 weeks, I let myself melt into that safety. I folded baby clothes, slowly lined up bottles on the dresser, reorganized the diaper bag 3 times over. My dad drove me to doctor's appointments and never complained about the waiting rooms. My mom made soups rich with vegetables and ginger, coaxing me to eat, even when nausea twisted my stomach. It was quiet, peaceful, almost too quiet, because Luke never called, not once. The only text I sent: "The baby's heartbeat is strong. Everything looks good," hung unanswered in our chat thread like a ghost. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need him. But at night, when the house was dark and my parents had gone to bed, I'd stare at my phone until my eyes blurred, willing it to buzz. It never did. By the 3rd week, I stopped expecting it. That afternoon, I was folding a pile of onesies on the couch when the doorbell rang. My mom called out from the foyer, "Sabrina, you have visitors." I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart jumped into my throat, half terrified it would be Luke. But when I stepped into the hall, it wasn't him. It was Evan and Vivian. They stood on the porch with the same familiar warmth I had once cherished. Only this time, their faces were lined with worry. Vivian clutched her purse like it was an anchor. Evan held a grocery bag in one hand, a bottle of wine in the other, his expression uncharacteristically grim. "Surprise visit," he said softly, almost apologetic. I froze. My mom glanced at me, eyebrows raised silently, asking if she should let them in. I nodded, slowly. Vivian stepped inside first, her voice trembling. "We are so sorry, sweetheart. We had no idea what was going on. Luke never told us you left." Evan set the groceries down on the kitchen counter, his shoulders slumping. "We stopped by your place. When you weren't there, we pressed him until he finally admitted it. I can't believe we thought everything was fine." I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. The shame wasn't mine, but it still wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. Vivian sat beside me on the couch and took my hands in hers. Her eyes glistened. "I remember what pregnancy was like. It's hard even with a supportive husband, and you—" Her voice cracked. "You shouldn't have to go through this alone." Something inside me cracked too. For weeks I had been carrying the weight of silence, Luke's indifference pressing down until I thought I would shatter. But here, finally, someone from his side of the family acknowledged it. Not with excuses, not with denial, with honesty. They stayed for over an hour. Evan told stories about Luke as a child, his obsession with Lego, sets the way he once tried to run away, but only made it to the end of the block before asking for a sandwich. Vivian shared memories of her own pregnancies, laughing gently at cravings and swollen feet, and for the first time in weeks I laughed. Not much, just a little, but enough. When they finally stood to leave, Vivian hugged me tightly. "Call us any time," she whispered. "Day or night. Your family. Don't forget that." After they left, I stood by the window watching their car pull out of the driveway. My mom came up beside me and rested a hand on my shoulder. "They seem like good people," she said softly. "They are," I admitted, blinking back tears. "It's just complicated." Because the truth was, I didn't know how to reconcile the kindness of Evan and Vivian with the cruelty of their son. I didn't know if it was possible to hold on to one while letting go of the other. But that day, their visit planted something fragile inside me, hope. Not for Luke, not for our marriage, but for the possibility that love and integrity still existed in the world. That night, lying in my childhood bed, I placed a hand over my belly and whispered to my daughter, "See? We're not as alone as we thought." I didn't know it yet, but Evan and Vivian's unexpected knock was only the beginning. They weren't just visitors. They were about to become allies. And Luke. He was about to learn that when you push your wife away, sometimes the people who step in to catch her aren't the ones you'd expect. Sometimes they're your own parents. It began before dawn, a deep ache in my back that wrapped around to the front and held like a vice. This wasn't another false alarm. This was real. Rain tapped against the windows as I timed contractions on my phone 5 minutes, then 4, then 3. My mom poked her head into the room, took one look at my face, and said softly, "It's time." We moved through the house like a quiet parade, my dad with the hospital bag, my mom steadying me when another wave hit. I texted Luke, "It's happening. Heading to Mercy General." His reply came minutes later, "Leaving now. On my way." At the hospital, nurses swarmed, monitors beeped, and fluorescent lights made everything too sharp. My mom gripped my hand through hours of pacing, groaning and gasping for breath. 9 hours in, I asked where Luke was. 10 hours, I stopped asking. He arrived just in time to hear our daughter cry. He slipped into the room, rain on his hair shirt clinging to his chest. For a moment, I saw the man I had fallen for, eyes wide, mouth trembling as he reached for my hand. Then the world narrowed into the doctor's voice, the nurse's encouragement, my mom whispering in my ear. With one final push, our daughter's cry split the air. They placed her on my chest, warm and impossibly small. I counted fingers, toes, the rise and fall of her chest. Luke made a sound between a laugh and a sob. He touched her head as if she might break. For that fragile moment, I let myself believe we had been given a fresh start. "Beautiful," he whispered, kissing my forehead. I clung to those words like a life raft. Back home 2 days later, everything felt both new and fragile. My mom stayed to show me how to hold the bottle, how to angle Lily's tiny body so she could breathe. Luke hovered nearby, clumsy but eager, fumbling with diapers and snapping the onesie wrong every time. He laughed at his mistakes, kissed Lily's forehead, called her Bean. Each gesture felt like a light in the fog, and I followed them, hoping they'd guide us back. But the phone never stopped buzzing. At first it was harmless. Slack notifications answered while he rocked the bassinet. "Just need to stay in the loop," he said. Soon the laptop was a permanent fixture on the dining table. By the end of the first week, he was back to jumping on Quick Call's headset, cradling his jaw, while I tried to soothe Lily's hiccups. By week 2, colic hit hard. Lily cried for hours every night, face-red little body curled tight. I walked the hallway endlessly humming lullabies I barely remembered. My shirt was stained, my body sore, my eyes ringed with shadows. Luke left early for work, travel mug in hand, kissing the baby's head with a quick, "You've got this, babe." I didn't have this. I was drowning. One night, after 3 straight hours of Lily's screaming, I finally got her to sleep on my chest. The house was dark except for the glow of Luke's laptop. I whispered, "Can you close that just for tonight?" He blinked, startled, then shut it. "Sorry, I just don't want to fall behind." I nodded, too tired to say what I was thinking. We were already behind, not on work, not on chores, but on us. The next morning he promised I'll be home by 6. But 6 came and went. By 9, I was pacing the hallway again, Lily wailing in my arms. When he finally walked in breathless, he dropped his bag, glanced at the stove, and asked almost casually, "What's for dinner?" Something in me cracked. The flicker of tenderness that had glowed when he first held our daughter dimmed. It didn't vanish all at once. It guttered, shrinking and swelling like a candle fighting against a draft. I cupped my hands around it for as long as I could. But deep down I knew the storm that had paused for Lily's first cry was already circling back. By the 3rd week at home, Lily's cries had become the soundtrack of my nights. Colic doesn't care about exhaustion or how many hours you've been awake or how raw your body still feels from birth. It comes like a storm, loud, relentless, and impossible to reason with. I rocked her until my arms shook, whispered lullabies until my throat went hoarse, paced hallways until my legs felt like lead. Through it all, Luke drifted in and out like a guest. He kissed the baby on his way out the door, murmured, "You've got this, babe," and left me alone with the chaos. Some nights he didn't come home until 9, and when he did, he dropped his bag, scanned the kitchen, and asked, "So what's for dinner?" It was as if the sight of his daughter's red, tear-streaked face barely registered compared to the sight of reheated soup on the stove. One Thursday evening, after Lily had finally passed out in the rocker, Luke came into the living room, scrolling through his phone. "My parents are coming next Saturday," he announced like it was a business meeting. "I'd appreciate it if you actually planned something decent this time." I blinked at him, stunned. "I didn't forget," I said, rocking Lily gently. Vivian already texted me. She told me not to stress about food. He snorted, tossing his phone onto the couch. That's just her being polite. I don't want them thinking you can't handle a simple lunch. Something inside me twisted. Luke, I'm barely sleeping. Lily cries for hours. You're at home all day. He cut in, his tone sharp. You can manage a meal. I wanted to scream. To tell him that home all day meant pumping milk at 3 a.m., bleeding through shirts, stumbling half asleep with a wailing infant in my arms. But the words caught in my throat. His eyes were already dismissing me. That week was a blur of caffeine and desperation. Every time Lily wailed, my chest ached with more than milk, it ached with dread of Saturday. I wanted to believe Vivian's text, wanted to believe she meant it when she said not to worry. But Luke's voice echoed louder. Don't embarrass me. The night before their visit, I tried. God, I tried. I started a pasta bake chopping onions one-handed while bouncing Lily against my shoulder. Halfway through boiling the noodles, she melted down again, red-faced fists clenched, shrieking until the windows rattled. I abandoned the stove, clutching her to my chest, pacing the hallway until the pasta turned to mush. By the time she finally fell asleep, the kitchen smelled like burnt cheese. I scraped it into the trash, fighting tears. Morning came too soon. I stood in the kitchen, dizzy from lack of sleep, hair matted with dry shampoo, my body shaking from sheer fatigue. Luke kissed my cheek as he left for work, completely oblivious to the dark circles under my eyes. Remember, he said breezily, no store-bought junk, as if my worth could be measured by a casserole. Desperation drove me to the phone. I called a local gourmet deli and begged them to put together an appetizer spread, marinated olives, truffle hummus, rosemary focaccia, imported cheeses, prosciutto crackers that looked handcrafted, even if they weren't. I even picked up a bouquet of tulips from the corner florist. If Luke wanted a performance, I would give him one. I set everything on the table with shaking hands, arranging the spread like a magazine photo shoot. The tulips leaned gently toward the sunlight streaming through the window. For the first time in days, the house smelled like something other than spit up and sour milk. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it, bracing myself for polite smiles and silent judgment. But instead of stiff faces, I found Vivian and Evan beaming on the porch. Vivian held a bottle of wine in one hand and a warm smile in the other. Evan lifted a bag with a grin. Surprise, Vivian sang. We figured you could use reinforcements. I nearly cried on the spot. They stepped in like a rescue team. Vivian scooped Lily from my arms as if she'd been waiting all week for the chance. Evan unpacked the bag's store-bought appetizers from the same deli I had just ordered. He winked when I told him what I'd done. Perfect, he said. Now we're having a feast. For the first time in weeks, I felt seen, not judged, not tested, seen. And as I sank onto the couch, tulips glowing on the table, wine uncorked, and my daughter cooing in her grandmother's arms, I realized something Luke's plan to make me impress his family was about to backfire spectacularly. Because the people he thought would judge me, they were already on my side. The house was almost peaceful when Luke's keys rattled in the door that afternoon. I had just drifted off on the couch, the sound of Lily's soft gurgles and Evan's low humming lulling me into the first real nap I'd had in days. Are you seriously sleeping right now? His voice jolted me awake. I blinked groggy, pushing myself upright. Luke stood in the entryway holding the deli platter I'd arranged earlier. His eyes narrowed. What are these? You bought appetizers. Are you kidding me? My chest tightened. What are you talking about? I asked you to cook, he snapped, waving the tray like evidence. My parents are here, and this is what you give them. The air shifted. Evan stepped out from the kitchen, wineglass in hand. Vivian followed Lily, nestled against her shoulder. Both wore matching expressions of disbelief. I tried to explain, my voice small. Your parents brought those. Luke's laugh was short, bitter. You're lying. Before I could speak again, Evan's voice cut through, sharp as glass. She's not lying. Luke froze. What I bought them, Evan said, stepping forward. Vivian picked them out. We figured Sabrina would be exhausted, so we brought food to help. Luke's jaw clenched. Oh, I just thought... You didn't think Vivian snapped, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. She adjusted Lily on her hip and glared at her son. You just assumed. And then you insulted your wife in front of your child. Luke's face paled. He tried to laugh it off, muttering, It's not a big deal, but Evan's patience had snapped. Not a big deal. You humiliate your wife because she didn't put on a performance for you. She just gave birth, Luke. She's raising your daughter while you act like you're the only one working. Silence fell heavy in the room. Luke shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between his parents and me. For once, he looked cornered. Then from the dining table his phone buzzed. Once. Twice. Vivian, standing closest, glanced at the screen out of habit. Her face froze, then hardened. Slowly she lifted the phone. "Who's Julia?" she asked, her voice deadly calm. Luke's entire body stiffened. "Mom, that's not—" But she held the phone higher, reading aloud. "You left your sweatshirt and lighter here. Can't wait for next time." The room fractured. My heart dropped, the air rushing out of my lungs. What I whispered, though I already knew. Luke's mouth opened and closed. "It's not what you think. She's just someone from work. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything." Evan's voice was low, dangerous. "She was pregnant with your daughter. You were supposed to be working overtime to support your family. Instead, you were sneaking around." Vivian stared at him like she didn't recognize him. "We trusted you. We defended you." Luke snapped back, his voice sharp. "She left me." She walked out. What was I supposed to do? I stepped forward, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "I left to survive, Luke. You made this house unbearable. You made me feel like a burden for carrying your child." His shoulders sagged, his voice dropping. "I'm sorry. It didn't mean anything, but the words were dust in my ears. I kept my tone flat." "How long?" He swallowed. "Since you went to stay with your parents." Something inside me went still. Vivian shook her head, her arms tightening protectively around Lily. "You said you wanted to fix things. You lied. Again." Luke turned toward me, desperation creeping into his eyes. "We can work this out." "Don't." Evan raised his hand, stepping between us. His gaze burned into his son. "Do you want him out?" he asked me directly. "Yes." My answer was immediate. Luke's jaw dropped. "You're kicking me out of my own house. You forfeited your place here," I said quietly. "I won't share a roof with someone who disrespects me in front of our child." Evan disappeared down the hall. Moments later, he returned with a duffel bag, Luke's. He set it firmly at his son's feet. "You'll stay with us until this is resolved, but you will not set foot in this house until Sabrina says otherwise." "Mom," Luke pleaded. Vivian's response was ice. "You're our son. But that doesn't make you right." I lifted Lily from her arms, clutching her to my chest. I didn't look back as they escorted him out. For the first time in months, the silence that followed didn't feel heavy. It felt like relief. 3 days passed before I saw them again. The doorbell rang mid-morning, and I opened it to find Evan and Vivian standing on the porch, not with Luke, but with a manila folder tucked under Evan's arm. He stepped inside without ceremony, placed the folder on the kitchen table, and said simply, "He signed everything." I stared confused. "Everything, full custody." Vivian explained, her voice steady. "Divorce terms, child support, clean and simple. We didn't let him argue." I sank into a chair, my knees suddenly weak. My whole body felt lighter, like someone had just unlatched the chains I'd been dragging. I don't even know what to say. "You don't need to," Evan replied. He slid the folder toward me. "Just sign where it's marked. We'll handle the rest." My hands trembled as I opened it. Legal language blurred before my eyes. Custody agreements, financial provisions, visitation restrictions. At the back, Evan had marked every page with sticky tabs. All I had to do was initial sign and breathe. Vivian reached into her purse and pulled out a white envelope. "This is from us," she said softly. I shook my head. "I can't take money from you." "You're not—" Evan cut in. "You're taking it from the people who believe in protecting the innocent." I opened the envelope. Inside was a check generous enough to carry me for months. My throat tightened. Vivian touched my hand. "Luke will repay every penny. We've taken over his salary and expenses. No more credit cards, no more online orders. He gets a weekly allowance, just enough for gas and groceries. That's it. And Lily's trust fund. We'll make sure it's paid every month on time." The room spun with disbelief. In-laws weren't supposed to do this. They weren't supposed to side with the daughter-in-law over their own son, strip him of his comforts, and hand her the tools for freedom. But here they were standing tall, calm, unwavering. "He's still our son," Vivian admitted, her voice breaking just slightly. "But that doesn't mean he gets to destroy 2 lives because of his selfishness." Evan nodded firmly. "We raised him better than this. He failed. Now he learns." I looked down at the papers, then at Lily asleep in her bassinet, her tiny chest rising and falling with a peace she didn't yet know how rare it was. For her sake, I picked up the pen. My name curved across the page, each signature feeling less like an ending and more like a beginning. By the time I set the pen down, my hands had steadied. Later, after they left, I sat on the couch with Lily nestled against me. The silence of the house was no longer suffocating. It was liberating. I didn't have to brace for the sound of Luke's keys in the door or his sighs of disappointment. I didn't have to measure my worth by meals or spotless floors. I could just be with my daughter, with myself, with peace. In the days that followed, word spread quickly. Luke's affair became office gossip. HR reassigned him to grunt work, no bonuses, no promotions, no more overtime excuses. Julia, the woman who had sent those texts, ghosted him the moment the divorce papers were final. He moved into a basement unit near the bus line, stripped of the life he once flaunted. Meanwhile, every month on the 1st, Vivian sent me a text, "Child support deposited." She never missed. She sometimes added, "Kiss Lily for us." I always did. Spring arrived slowly with longer days and softer mornings. My dad fixed up my childhood room, my mom helped with bottle feeds, and laughter crept back into corners of the house. I found myself breathing easier, smiling more, dreaming again. When I finally returned to work, my boss welcomed me with a flexible schedule and no questions asked. My coworkers left sticky notes on my desk. "One meeting at a time. You've got this." I rented a small 2-bedroom apartment near a park. Lily's room filled with secondhand books and stuffed animals arranged like guards around her crib. And one afternoon while she napped, I stood in the kitchen and realized something profound. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt mine. Luke had tried to break me with neglect, betrayal, and cruelty, but in the end he handed me something else entirely: freedom. And with Evan and Vivian's unexpected strength at my side, that freedom was sealed, notarized, and signed into law. Freedom doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't arrive with a parade or a marching band. For me, it came in the form of quiet mornings, soft baby giggles, and the hum of a washing machine in my parents' house. In the weeks after the divorce papers were signed, I found myself relearning how to breathe. No more late-night anxiety about Luke's footsteps in the hallway. No more swallowing my words to keep the peace. Just the sound of Lily's little coos at dawn, the smell of my mom's coffee, and the steady comfort of my dad whistling off-key while fixing things around the house. There were hard moments, of course. Nights when Lily wouldn't sleep, when I sat on the floor with my back against the crib, crying quietly so I wouldn't wake her. Days when my body felt foreign, stretched and scarred, and I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. But through it all, I wasn't alone anymore. My mom would slip into the nursery at 3 a.m. whispering, "Go rest. I'll take her." My dad left encouraging notes on the fridge, "Proud of you. Keep going." For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. When spring finally thawed the cold edges of winter, I was ready to take the next step. My boss called and said, "Whenever you're ready, your desk is waiting." I was nervous, worried I'd forgotten everything, worried I wouldn't be able to juggle motherhood and work. But when I walked back into the office, I was met with sticky notes on my computer that read, "You've got this. One meeting at a time." My colleagues welcomed me back without judgment, only kindness. That first paycheck felt like oxygen. I wasn't just surviving off generosity or Luke's court-mandated support. I was contributing again, building again. Every dollar earned was a reminder you can stand on your own. Soon after, I found a small 2-bedroom apartment near a park. It wasn't fancy, but it had sunlight that poured through the windows in the morning and quiet nights where I could finally hear myself think. Lily's room became my favorite space walls, lined with secondhand picture books, stuffed animals standing guard around her crib, a mobile that spun slowly while she giggled. Moving in felt like shedding an old skin. My parents helped carry boxes. Evan and Vivian dropped off baby supplies, and friends from work donated furniture. Piece by piece, the apartment turned into a home. my home. There were moments of bittersweet reflection. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at the door, expecting Luke to walk in with his easy smile, as if none of it had ever happened. But then Lily would laugh, or I'd curl up on the couch with a cup of tea in blessed silence, and I'd remember I didn't miss him. I missed the version of myself I thought I'd get to be with him, and that version was still possible without him. On weekends, I pushed Lily's stroller through the park, soaking in the fresh air, watching the sunlight dapple across her tiny face. Neighbors stopped to coo over her, strangers smiled. One older woman touched my arm and said, "You look like you've found peace." And she was right. Peace didn't mean life was perfect. Bills still came. Diapers still ran out at the worst times. Loneliness crept in on quiet nights. But peace meant I no longer had to apologize for being tired or hungry or human. Peace meant no one stood over me demanding proof of my worth. Peace meant every choice I made was mine and mine alone. Sometimes people ask if I regret anything, and the truth is, yes, I regret shrinking myself to fit Luke's version of what a wife should be. I regret all the times I softened my voice, swallowed my anger, and blamed myself for his failures. But I don't regret walking away. I don't regret choosing silence over shouting, calm over chaos, freedom over fear. Because from those ashes, I built something stronger. And as I watched Lily take her first wobbly steps across the living room floor of our little apartment, sunlight pooling at her feet, I realized something. I wasn't just rebuilding a life. I was building a new one that belonged to both of us. Sometimes closure doesn't arrive with a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a door clicking shut in a room you didn't realize was still open. For me, closure came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just returned from the park with Lily, her cheeks rosy from the spring air. As I set her down for a nap, my phone buzzed with a news alert from the local business journal. IT firm restructures, several demoted to administrative roles. Luke's name was buried halfway down the article, stripped of his management title. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then set it face down on the counter. I didn't feel triumph, not anger, not even sadness. Just nothing. The kind of nothing that feels like peace. Because the truth is, Luke wasn't my problem anymore. For so long, I had twisted myself into knots, trying to earn his approval to keep our marriage afloat, to be the version of a wife he thought he wanted. I cooked when I was sick, cleaned when I was bone-tired, smiled when I wanted to scream. And in return, he gave me contempt, betrayal, and silence. But standing there in my little apartment kitchen, sunlight spilling across the counter, I realized I didn't need his approval anymore. I never should have needed it at all. What I needed was exactly what I had. Now a daughter who looked up at me with unconditional love, a family who had proven their loyalty through action, and a life that was finally mine to shape. Did I wish things had been different? Of course. I wished the man I married had been the man he pretended to be. I wished my daughter's first memories of her father could be gentle ones, not fractured by absence and disappointment. But wishing doesn't rewrite reality. What I could do was learn, and I had. I learned that love without respect is just performance, that family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up when it matters. That silence, once my prison, could also become my freedom. I thought back to that dinner table months ago, Luke sneering at me in front of his parents, accusing me of being lazy, unworthy. That night had felt like the beginning of the end. But in truth, it was the beginning of something else entirely, the moment his parents saw me, really saw me, and chose to stand on the side of what was right. Evan and Vivian texted me every month without fail. Child support deposited. Kiss Lily for us. Sometimes Vivian sent photos of their garden or stories from her book club. They never pressured me to forgive their son. They simply stayed present, steady, and kind. In many ways, they became more of a family to me in those months than Luke ever had been. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes the people you expect to hurt you will surprise you, and the people you expect to love you will fail. Life isn't fair, but it does reveal the truth eventually. I still hear from friends who ask, "Do you miss being married?" And my answer is always the same. No, I miss the version of myself I thought I'd get to become. I miss the fairy tale I clung to too long. But the marriage itself, I don't miss apologizing for being exhausted. I don't miss walking on eggshells. I don't miss shrinking myself so someone else could feel bigger. And I definitely don't miss Luke. Now, when I sit in the park and watch Lily toddle through the grass, when I hear her laugh at something as simple as a butterfly, I understand that survival wasn't the end goal. Freedom was, peace was, and I found both. So if there's a moral to my story, it's this: you don't have to keep setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Respect shouldn't hinge on how well you cook, clean, or perform. Family acceptance should come from who you are, not from what you can put on a table. The silence I once dreaded is now my sanctuary. And in that silence, I've discovered the loudest truth of all: I am still here, still standing, and finally free. The silence after Luke's outburst was razor sharp. His parents stood between us, wine glasses still on the counter, their granddaughter nestled against Vivian's shoulder. The air smelled faintly of tulips and deli food, but beneath it all was the thick, unmistakable weight of betrayal. Evan turned to me, his voice steady and deliberate. "Do you want him out?" My heart pounded, but my answer came without hesitation. "Yes." Luke's jaw dropped. "You're kicking me out of my own house." I clutched Lily closer, my voice even. "You forfeited your place here. I won't share a roof with someone who insults me, cheats on me, and lies to my face, especially not in front of our daughter." For once he had no script, no excuses, just stunned silence. Evan disappeared down the hallway, the heavy tread of his footsteps echoing like a verdict. Moments later, he returned with a duffel bag I hadn't even realized he'd packed. He set it firmly at Luke's feet. "You'll stay with us until this is resolved, but you will not set foot in this house again without Sabrina's permission." "Dad," Luke started, his voice cracking, but Vivian cut him off, her tone colder than I'd ever heard it. "You're our son, but that doesn't make you right. And tonight, it doesn't even make you welcome." The words hit harder than anything I could have said. Evan opened the door, and Luke stumbled into the night, his face pale, his protest dying on his lips. The door shut behind him with a finality that shook the walls. I stood in the nursery later that evening, rocking Lily, while tears slipped silently down my cheeks. Not tears for him, those had run dry long ago, but tears of release. For the first time in months, the house was free of his shadow. 3 days later, the doorbell rang again. My stomach twisted, expecting confrontation. But when I opened it, only Evan and Vivian stood there, calm and composed. No Luke in sight. Evan carried a thick manila folder, which he placed on the kitchen table like an offering. He signed everything he said simply. I blinked, unsure I'd heard right. Everything Vivian nodded. Full custody, divorce terms, child support. We didn't let him argue. It's clean and simple. I sank into a chair, my hands trembling. I don't even know what to say. "You don't need to say anything," Evan replied, sliding the folder toward me. "Just sign where it's marked. We'll handle the rest." Vivian reached into her purse and set down a white envelope. "This is from us." I shook my head instinctively. "I can't take money from you." "You're not," Evan said firmly. "You're taking it from the people who believe in protecting the innocent. Luke will repay every penny. We've taken over his salary and expenses. He gets a weekly allowance, just enough for gas and groceries. Nothing more. And Lily's trust fund. We'll make sure it's paid every month on time." My throat tightened as I opened the folder. Page after page, the words blurred together: custody arrangements, financial agreements, visitation terms. Each sticky tab marked exactly. They say that time heals all wounds, but I've learned that time alone isn't enough. Healing comes from choices, small, stubborn choices, to let go of bitterness, to forgive, without forgetting to step into peace even when anger feels easier. Months after the dust settled, I walked with Lily through the park near our apartment. She toddled on shaky legs, chasing sunlight and butterflies with a laugh so pure it made strangers smile. I watched her and thought, this is what freedom looks like. Not loud, not flashy, just simple, quiet joy. I no longer replayed Luke's words in my head at night. I no longer asked myself what I could have done differently. The truth had been revealed, and like the verse says, the truth will set you free. And it did. Truth freed me from the weight of pretending, from the endless cycle of trying to earn love that was never truly there. But freedom doesn't mean I carry hatred. It would have been easy to let anger consume me, to curse Luke every time I thought about those long nights alone or the sting of his betrayal. Instead, I chose something harder: forgiveness. Not for him, but for me. Forgiveness meant I no longer gave him power over my thoughts. It meant I could smile without bitterness, laugh without guilt, and raise my daughter without teaching her to hate her father. That doesn't mean I excused him. Evan and Vivian made sure accountability was enforced, every dollar of child support, every restriction in place. Justice mattered. But forgiveness allowed me to move forward without dragging the past like a chain. I also forgave myself for staying too long, for believing too many lies, for shrinking into silence when I should have spoken up. I realized those weren't failures, they were lessons. And lessons become stepping stones when you choose to rise. Looking back, what struck me most was the courage of Evan and Vivian. In a world where many parents would blindly protect their son, they chose something different. They proved the old Western proverb true. What is right is not always popular, and what is popular is not always right. They stood for truth, even when it meant standing against their own child. That is real family. That is love. And so this story, though born out of betrayal, is also a story of compassion. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, people can surprise you. That support can come from unexpected places. That healing is possible. To those of you watching or listening to true revenge stories from all over the world, whether you're in Maine, Manchester, Manila, or Melbourne, I want you to take this with you. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else. Sometimes the truest form of revenge is building a life so full of peace and joy that the person who hurt you no longer has a place in it. If you've ever walked away from something toxic, just to breathe again, know this: you are not weak. You are brave. If you've ever chosen to forgive, not to excuse, but to free yourself, know this: you are stronger than you realize. And if you've ever felt invisible, unheard, or unloved, know this: the right people, the ones who matter, will see you. They will stand beside you. My journey wasn't easy. There were tears, nights of doubt, days when I thought I'd never feel whole again. But here I am, still standing still, smiling, holding my daughter's hand as she learns to walk in a world I'm determined to make gentler for her. So let me leave you with this. Don't confuse silence with weakness. Don't confuse forgiveness with defeat, and never confuse performance with worth. You are enough just as you are. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from something that was breaking you only to find peace on the other side? Share your story in the comments below. I read them all, and your words remind us we're not alone. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again for more true revenge stories. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is not hate, it's healing.